It's time to kill all your bland characters now, especially the main characters. They've got to go before they kill your story. And the way to do that super quickly is to give them contradictory wants and needs. That's my term. And I'll explain what that means in a second. But relatable, realistic, recognizable main characters are complicated, not two-dimensional, and they're often battling a demon within. The demon is their shadow side, and it's the opposite of their public face. What that means is they have an obvious superficial desire to achieve something, which is probably what's driving the story. If, for example, they want to set themselves free, they want to be a hero, they want to find true love, etc. Now, if you give them an internal need to have the exact opposite of what they're seeking in the story, you will create someone we can all relate to. So if your protagonist wants to find true love, maybe give them an internal need to either destroy true love, to make sure they end up lonely, or maybe they want to sabotage love altogether. On the surface, if you asked your main character, they'd say what they really want is to find true love. But what's driving them unconsciously is the belief that they don't deserve true love at all and must never achieve it. That's called a contradictory wants and needs situation. In thinking that through with your protagonist, you'll create a complex, rich character who people recognize and can probably relate to. You'll certainly create a more interesting character than one who's simply seeking true love and then finds it. That's way too boring. You're going to kill your story if you do that. And the reason why this works, this is Psychology 101 from a complete and utter amateur. Just someone who's been a close observer of life, read a lot of psychology books, and has applied this to the creative process, my creative process. So take it with a grain of salt if you like. But I would say best of all, whether it sounds right or wrong to you doesn't really matter. Just give it a try and see what happens to your story. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But it's been working for me. Here's what I think goes on. In childhood, we often suffer what I call a primal kind of wound. So we do something wrong in the eyes of our parents and we're severely punished for it. Now, we're punished in a way that actually impacts our identity. We're told, you're a terrible person. It doesn't matter what we've done wrong or what the so-called crime has been. The message we receive as a sensitive child and a vulnerable child is you're a terrible person. And here's the problem. Because you're a kid and you're so completely dependent on the love of your parents, when they tell you you're a terrible person, you believe it. So in the moment that you start to believe you're a terrible person, a kind of split occurs. The deepest part of you believes that it's true, you're a terrible person, and the outer public-facing part of you decides it has to prove you're not as bad as you really think you are. And that's when you start acting like a really, really good person. In fact, if you're going to prove to the world that you're not a terrible person, you might even try to behave like a perfect person, which is a very dangerous trap to fall into. But now you're kind of like two people. You're the surface person, desperate to be seen as good, and the inner person who knows they're bad. How this plays out in life is as a set of contradictory wants and needs. We might want love, to be loved, to find perfect love, simply because it proves we're good. But beneath the surface is that shadow side, that contradictory side, which, if we're unaware, is probably doing the driving. And its objective is to prove itself right too. And it proves itself right by making sure that love becomes something you never fully experience. Because only good people are loved, and we have established in childhood, or wherever the split may occur. Sometimes it's in childhood, and sometimes it can be outside of the parental home, and maybe later on in life through some sort of trauma as well. But it's setting out to prove you're not a good person at all. You're a terrible person, and it's going to prove it. So this manifests in self-sabotaging behavior, wherever especially love gets too close. In fact, it might be repulsive to you on some level if this is a split within you, and I'm presuming that it's not. I'm just talking generally here about characters. But maybe you self-sabotage when love gets too close or too strong or too open or too kind. There'll be something perhaps that makes you feel a little repulsed by too much genuine love because it feels like it's contradicting this need to be a terrible person. An example of it happening in public life is perhaps where a very righteous member of society who's very much loved by a whole community has a dark private life that, if it was revealed, would undermine all the goodwill felt towards that person. That's an extreme version of what I'm calling a primal wound. Lesser ones are much more common and appear just as compulsive and addictive behaviour, unconscious behaviour in other words, where otherwise intelligent and self-disciplined people can't stop themselves from doing something particularly harmful to themselves. It all sounds kind of terrible, and it can be, but in another way, often our passions in life and our purpose is actually created by the split. Take comedians, for example, many of whom will tell you that they actually had very sad early lives, and yet they bring so much love and laughter to the world. So the split is in them is that they are a sad and troublesome person, perhaps a burden, and the way they battle that demon is by proving to the world that they can make people laugh. They can bring joy and happiness to society, and they bring light into the world, but it's there because of the cross that they're bearing at the same time. So if you create a person who wants to save the world, then you might want to give them a contradictory need. And that need could be one of these: have the world hate them. Prove that they're worthless. That's a much more likely need, in my opinion. They want to be a hero because they feel they're worthless. Or destroy themselves. They want to do something amazingly heroic and wonderful, save the world, but in actual fact, what they really want deep down is to destroy themselves. So contradictory wants and needs. If you've got a character with a clear want, work out what that character's contradictory need might be. And that way you'll create a recognizable, rich character who people don't forget in a hurry.